el idioma de su preferencia que ustedes vayan a escuchar este evento. En la parte inferior van a encontrar un icono de un globo donde podrán elegir ya sea el idioma inglés o el idioma español para comenzar la conferencia. Vamos a dar unos minutos adicionales para que el resto de participantes puedan entrar a la plataforma y daremos inicio a este evento. Muchísimas gracias. Gusto para nosotros como Cámara de Comercio Ecuatoriano Canadiense de Guayaquil y Seneca College darles a todos ustedes una cordial bienvenida a esta webinar internacional Equilibrando tu vida entre objetivos profesionales y personales, la cual estará a cargo de nuestra experta canadiense de Seneca College, Daphne Magna. Queremos darle al inicio de esta conferencia nuestros agradecimientos a nuestros sponsors, a la empresa Mar Global, a Unidad Educativa Bilingüe Nuevo Mundo y a Yovilsa, Agencia de Aduanas. También queremos expresar nuestro mayor agradecimiento a Seneca College por el apoyo que nos han brindado en el desarrollo de esta actividad, y en especial a sus representantes de Seneca College, la señorita Mónica Cronfley, directora de International Academy Pathway and Mobility, y Ronan Wilson, Associate Director International Mobility, por todo su apoyo en el desarrollo de estas actividades que hacemos con el fin de apoyar a la comunidad local con estos diversos tópicos. También queremos darle las gracias a nuestro socio, señor Eduardo Calderón, de la empresa SGI, que es la empresa que nos está ayudando con el servicio de traducción, por toda su asistencia en el desarrollo de esta conferencia. Vamos a dar inicio entonces a este evento. Antes de nada, quiero brindarle la palabra a nuestro cónsul honorario de Canadá en Guayaquil, señor Basil Haylock. Bienvenido, Basil.
Thank you, Jessica. David Agnew, President of Seneca, Daphne Magna, our guest speaker, and Ronan Wilson, Director of the International Program. And from our side here in the chamber, Jaime Ramirez, who's the President of the chamber, and Jessica Nicolaides, who is the Executive Director of the chamber, and of course, all the members present today. Welcome to you all. First, I would like to thank Seneca, who in coordination with the Canadian Ecuadorian Chamber in Guayaquil, have organized this presentation for members of our chamber and the general community in Guayaquil. From what I have read, Speaker Daphne Magna brings a great depth of experience and know-how to the table today. She has been building effective bridges for group communication in institutions around the world, as well as preparing important companies for global opportunities. These are but a few of her accomplishments, so I feel that we are indeed fortunate to have Daphne on board today to help us understand how to identify and prioritize our real goals, aspirations, and interests. As you know, the isolations and the need for working and studying at home caused by this pandemic has created stress and uncertainties in trying to adapt to this new normal. It has disrupted our collective work routines and our need to physically associate with friends, family, and associates. And many people have had to struggle with defining suitable hours for work at home and for leisure and family time activities. So I think that today's presentation of how to balance work with one's personal life is especially pertinent. We cannot underestimate the importance of our chamber's relationship with such a reputable Canadian university like Seneca, not only because of the growing interests of young Ecuadorians to pursue their career development in Canada, but also because of the opportunity to receive and share its expertise and knowledge in areas of vital importance to our members and the Ecuadorian community. This is, I think, Jessica, the third virtual presentation that we have shared with Seneca. And until we can safely return to organizing collective gatherings, the Chamber certainly looks forward to developing other initiatives with Seneca through 2021. This Chamber has always been especially proactive in promoting strong bilateral educational relationships through educational fairs, the student, teacher, and professional exchanges, work-study opportunities, and guest speaker presentations. So we value Seneca's commitment and contributions to this chamber's objectives, and we will continue to work towards a healthy and long-lasting relationship. Thank you to you all for being here today.
Muchas gracias, Basil, por esas palabras. Siguiendo con nuestro programa del día de hoy, me gustaría poder brindarle las palabras a nuestro representante de la Universidad de Seneca, señor David Agnew, presidente de Seneca College, entidad socia de nuestra Cámara, muy activa, con quienes hemos trabajado esta conferencia y al cual le doy la palabra y la bienvenida. Señor Agnew.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to join you today. You know, it's very interesting that that this important seminar and topic falls on today, because in Canada we call this Bell Let's Talk Day, and it's all around mental health, and it's around raising money for mental health services, and it's also very much about promoting the need to reach out and talk to people. And sometimes, as we know, when you're talking about mental health, that's all it really means, is a conversation, reaching out to extend a helping hand to somebody. And of course, as Basil said, I mean, all of this has been exaggerated and accelerated by the pandemic. The distance that we have from each other physically, even if we can make it up virtually, has been very hard on people. So I think it's such an appropriate topic to talk about how to balance your life. Because of course, so many people driven to their homes are trying to balance all the different demands of work and children and trying to keep a family life going and a social life going. So this is a wonderful topic. But of course, I really want to say how much I appreciate this still relatively new partnership between Seneca and the Ecuadorian Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And you know, they say in these times that we all require creativity and resilience. And I have to say that those who have kept the flame alive of this partnership have showed a ton of creativity and lots of resilience. And I'm just so pleased that it has kept going, and of course prepares us for the time when we can get back to seeing each other in person and visiting each other's countries, exchanging students, learning from each other, because that's of course ultimately why we want to be in a partnership with an institution, and a prestigious institution like the Chamber of Commerce. I liken it to the fine wine. You know, they say the best wines are the ones whose vines grow in tough soil. And if they can, so I think we've got a champagne of a relationship going here, because there couldn't be much tougher soil than getting a thousands of miles away relationship, not just started, but sustained and growing throughout a pandemic that's kept us in our homes. So to all of those, Jessica, very much to you, I know, and the team here at Seneca, the team at the Chamber, thank you. And I look forward to great things happening. And I look forward to visiting your beautiful country when we're all allowed to. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, Mr. Agnew, por sus palabras. Realmente seguiremos trabajando como usted indica. Es un gusto para nosotros tener esta relación de crecimiento, como usted dice, como un gran champán, como un buen champán en crecimiento, y más que nada desarrollando frutos en conjunto para apoyar a la comunidad tanto canadiense en educación, brindando oportunidades, y también para los estudiantes ecuatorianos que tengan la experiencia de poder estudiar en instituciones de gran reconocimiento, como es el caso de Seneca. Muchas gracias por su apoyo. Continuando entonces con nuestro evento, quisiera presentarles y darles a conocer un poco del perfil de nuestra expositora del día de hoy. Contamos con una expositora de una gran trayectoria. La señorita Daphne Magna es consultora en gestión multilingüe en español, italiano y francés, especialista en cambio cultural y liderazgo inclusivo. Ha transformado equipos multiculturales, ayudándolos a sentirse cómodos y a construir vínculos más profundos en Nigeria, México, Estados Unidos, India, Singapur, China, Alemania, Francia, y ahora en Ecuador. Es la creadora de Culture Q and Brand DNA, programas personalizables para equipos globales. Posee un alto nivel de conocimiento y experiencia en diseños de currículo, cultura Código de Ética, Valores de Marca, Team Building e iniciativas de responsabilidad social empresarial. Ha pasado los últimos 10 años trabajando con empresas de Fortune 500, empresas emergentes y educación superior, solucionando experiencias de aprendizaje para prepararlas para oportunidades globales. Su fuerte es su capacidad para comunicar ideas complejas de manera creativa y comprensible. Su extenso trabajo en derechos humanos y como miembro fundador de la Junta de Black Professionals in Tech Network la llevó a fundar Cómodos, a liderar y crear un espacio seguro donde los líderes y aliados de la comunidad negra puedan abordar problemas difíciles y trabajar para eliminar el racismo sistémico y el significado de su vida ser completa. Queremos darle las gracias a Daphne por su tiempo y darle la bienvenida y la palabra. Bienvenida, Daphne.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Muchísimas gracias. Espero de practicar un poquito de español esta noche, pero I will do the majority of it in English. What can I say? I am very glad to be here. I thank you also, Ronan from Seneca, for inviting me. I've been doing some work with Seneca, and it was a beautiful transition to be able to come and join you all here tonight. One of the things about working remote is that it's different for everybody, depending on your life circumstances, you know? And because we live in such a global world and we speak to each other in many different capacities on an everyday basis, we have these lifestyles that we're trying to mesh and collaborate with, and it's quite a challenge. So I'm really glad to be here to be able to talk to you about those traps that we fall into sometimes. And it's not just you, it's me too. It's young, it's old, it's guys who've been, you know, traveling and working internationally for ages, and it's young folks that are just getting into their career. So we all have struggles in this work-life balance scenario. So we're going to really dig deep and jump into that tonight. I'm going to share my screen so that we can talk about in more depth some of the issues that Equilibrando tu Vida entails. So today, I want you to think of why. Why is balancing your life so important? Why is that challenge between the two, your career goals and your personal goals, such a challenge? What is it that we believe that we are striving for that seems so unattainable at times? So we're going to explore that. We're going to examine different ideas of what work-life balance means to you and how to capitalize on some of the smart ways to design a lifestyle you love and one that loves you back. Que les corresponden, no? So during this session, we're going to work on a few really key outcomes. And I'm not going to talk any more about me because Jessica did a wonderful job of a way too long bio. so you know quite a bit about me already. But during our time together today, I want you to be able to ask questions in the chat and you know, feel free at the end of the conversation, we're going to have a Q&A. But definitely get your pen and paper out because we're going to do some work, okay? Some of the things we want to achieve today are los metas, no? Are to define the work-life balance and what that means to you now and what that you want it to mean to you in 5 years from now. We're also going to try to describe the importance of work-life balance with respect to you and your personal drivers, las motivaciones, no? The things that really push you in life. We're going to identify maybe 3 to 5 different underlying values, los valores, that push you to make certain life decisions. And ideally, after we've talked about all these things, we'll have the beginning of an outline for an action plan, you know, things we can do to improve our work-life balance. Because, you know, last year was obviously a shock to the world, and we're still dealing with it now. So we have to figure out how to implement things, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And we want to make sure we are taking care of ourselves during this process, because it's so new and strange. So I just want to remind you that we have a poll option in this type of webinar, and we're going to use the poll twice in the workshop. So I'm going to let you know when to look out for it. Okay, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, go to the chat room and write them in there, and Jessica and I will try and keep track of them and address them at the end. Okay, but don't forget to get out your pen and paper. We're old school, and everything is much more achievable when it's intentional and when it's written down. All right, so first things first. Oh, apologies, my little mouse is super fast. When I say level set, what I mean is, why are we here talking about work-life balance? What does it mean to you? And why has this been something that I've been trying to work on for years? You know, for the past 15 years, I've been intentionally cultivating a lifestyle of purposeful work, of deep relationships, and of lifelong learning. And part of the way I've manifested that is through traveling extensively, probably 4 to 5 times a year for the past 10 years, to work and to explore places I'm curious about, and to experience cultures that inspire me, to create educational content, and to put myself to physical tests like snowboarding in Jackson, Wyoming, or scuba diving 100 feet deep in the Caribbean, or paragliding off the mountains in Medellin. You know, just absolute craziness. But what about now? What about now when we can't travel? We can't escape. We're told to stay inside, to not visit friends and family, to not work out. What do we do then? Well, we slow down. We reevaluate. We connect with all the things that were passing us by so quickly because we were busy doing a million things. So one of the important lessons I learned along my own career path, working abroad and working with different clients from different countries, is that many of us care about the same things. But what's interesting is that we are all at the center of our own universe. Okay, now sometimes we don't realize this. Sometimes we don't realize that your center and my center are two totally different things. And we are the emanating point of all of our energy, you know, the source of all of our creations. And life, our lives, are really our master creation, right? So we really want to think about how we direct that energy, direct that source, that life energy source, to create the lifestyle that we really want, because we're the only ones who can do it. We are our center of the universe. So think about that for a minute. If everyone else's center is different and we are the emanating point, I think it's really important that we recognize, though we share similar wants and desires and ways of living our lives, we have to do it differently depending on where we are, where we're at, what our lifestyle is like, what our socioeconomic means are. But I want to tell you that I really agree with this author. Her name is Jay Ellard, and she's the author of The 5 Truths of Work-Life Balance. And she's spoken to thousands of people across 50 or so countries, and she found that most people share a simple and similar desire to create easy joy and meaningful engagement between the interconnected roles, relationships, and responsibilities that make up their lives. Let's break this down. Here you are. This is you. And we have all these interconnected parts of our lives that we have to think with, all right? This is our health, you know, our wellness, how we take care of ourselves, and how we feel on an everyday basis, right? Then we have our family, our immediate family and our home life and all the things we need to do to sustain ourselves and to make sure those relationships and those people in our lives are well and thriving. Then we have our friends and our community, right? Our friends and our community are a big part of who we are. They help us grow. We learn so much from each other. And they're a part of us. They're an extension. This is the interconnected piece of who we are, all of these different parts. And then lastly, of course, there's our work and our career and the things that we want to achieve professionally. These are all pieces of who we are and what we do and why we do what we do that are so important for us to understand how they're connected. So now let's jump into what work-life balance really means. And I'll tell you, there's kind of a dispute, you know, there's some different definitions and understandings of what it means. But at the end of the day, what we're going to get to by the end of our conversation today is what it means to you. All right? So there's different words that people use. In English, they use work-life balance, work-life blending, and work-life integration. You know, when they talk about balance, the challenge is they talk about things that are equal value. You know, work and personal life is equal, but it's not really that way. There's this ideal or this idea that if you separate these two things, there's this tension because they're competing for time, right? With the term blending, it has the feeling that there's this mixing of things, right? And it's inevitable. And you have to create intentional boundaries for them to not mix so much. And then with integration, you have the thought that, okay, maybe we can move gently between these different areas. Maybe there's a way for us to integrate at a level that there isn't so much friction. Well, according to a business magazine named Tech Target, I want to really clarify these definitions with you so you can decide which one makes sense for you. Work-life balance is really the optimal arrangement of an individual's on-the-job and private time so that you can facilitate health and personal satisfaction without negatively impacting your productivity or your professional success. I think everyone would agree that that seems ideal, right? Now, work-life blending is where you find ways to step away from either work or life without having to compromise, sacrifice, or favor one over the other. So Dr. Howard, who's a behavioral scientist, talks about blending in the idea that you shouldn't be competing. You should be able to compartmentalize and say, no, this time is for work, this time is for life, and there's not this tension. And then finally, with work-life integration, this is an approach that you create more synergies between all areas. So maybe when you're working, you're at home with your family, or maybe when you're at home with your family, you're doing some work, or you're in your community and you're doing some work, or your personal well-being is wrapped into your work time. So there's a bit different of an understanding of the lines that are getting blurred in that scenario. So I want you to think about what makes sense for you and what applies to you. So why is this balance so crucial in the first place? Stress makes people nearly 3 times as likely to leave their jobs, temporarily impairs strategic thinking, and dulls creative abilities. Burnout is a threat to your bottom line, one that costs the US more than $300 billion a year in absenteeism, turnover, diminished productivity, and medical, legal, and insurance costs. Now, can you imagine $300 billion a year because of stress is what companies lose in the US? So think about it. Does it really matter to you as an employee as much as it matters to your employer? I mean, there's really a case for both, you know? Both of us need to really care about this and worry about it and find solutions to it. So in Ecuador, I wasn't able to find that exact type of stat for Ecuador, but in Ecuador, there's a report that indicates at a regional level, depression is the leading cause of disability. So 7.8% of total disability. And in this case, here we are, 8.3% in the top 5 of South America, really, are one of the first 5 countries where disability is due to depression. And so this is significant for all of us to understand how important addressing our work-life balance is, because these are the effects, right? In Canada, in Canada, there's a Mercer report that shows equally, just like in the US, absenteeism costs employers $16.6 billion annually, right? Stress affects 72% of all employees. And disability strikes 1 in 5 Canadians due to psychological health problems or illness. These are staggering numbers. So when we talk about work-life balance, we're talking about how do we help ourselves do better with stress, manage stress, and avoid these health challenges. So let's go to our first poll. Eduardo, please be my guest in setting up our poll for our participants today. And it's really important that we get a sense of... Oh, hola, Eduardo. It's really important that we get a sense of the things that matter to our work-life balance and help us understand. So vacations, for example, whether it's visiting old cultural cities, beautiful beach towns, or rolling hills or mountaintops, you know, the question is, where have you been lately, and have you made vacations a priority? Now, we know that this year or this past year has been a write-off. So when we're answering this question, let's think about 2019. Okay. And I think there is one question that refers to now. So do your best to fill out this poll as soon as it becomes active. You'll have 45 seconds to a minute or so to fill it out. Eduardo, how are we doing there?
Fantastic. So do I start with vacations, right? With pool
Yes.
vacations?
Yes,
fantastic.
please.
I'm going to start vacations now.
Perfecto. All right, so you can fill out the poll as you see it. You'll see it jump on your screen. And there are 3 questions. Shouldn't take you very long. Now, just so you know, I found out a very interesting statistic in that in Latin America, Ecuador has 15 paid vacation days by law. And the average is 15. 30 is the highest in Brazil, and 6 is the lowest in Mexico. So you guys are not doing so bad in terms of employees giving you vacation days, but I want to know how well you're doing in you taking them and using them for your own benefit. All right? So let's see. I want to look at these statistics now. ¿Quién tuvo que cancelar unas vacaciones o viaje debido al COVID? 54% yes and 46% no. All right. ¿Cuántas vacaciones suele tomar al año? 63% 1, 21% 2 to 3, and a whopping 13% 0. We have to work on that. And ¿por qué pospones unas vacaciones o no las toma? 28% no puede tomar el tiempo libre, 20% demasiado caro, and 20% no lo hago, siempre me tomo mis vacaciones. Perfecto. That 20%, ojalá, you're doing something right. All right? So the reason why this is so important, I'm going to share the poll results so you can see. The reason why this is so important is because there's actually a study that shows, do vacations really matter? Well, the Framingham Heart Study, the longest running study on cardiovascular disease, found that men at high risk for coronary disease and who failed to take annual vacations were 32% more susceptible to dying from a heart attack. So yes, taking vacations reduces the chance of men dying from heart attacks. Not only that, but it has shown in other studies, there's a Marshfield study for women in rural Wisconsin that showed stress levels and women suffering from depression was increased by those who did not take vacations at least twice a year. Twice a year. So the sweet spot is 2 to 3 vacations a year. I want you to think about that for a moment and think about how you answered those questions and how perhaps you should put more emphasis on taking your vacations or spending some time away from work and with family and doing the things you love to do for your health, for your heart health, for your brain health, and for your happiness, your felicidad. All right. Let's keep going. So, do any of these look like you? Constant Zoom calls, working at home with the kids and everybody around, trying to escape to your backyard maybe, or finding a park bench and working, or working anywhere on your living room floor or the stairs in front of a coffee shop. Do any of these look like you right now? This is what's happening right now. We are in this remote work flux, and it's taking over our lives. So what are some of the challenges? Do some of these make sense to you? Are you experiencing some of these, like working too much and not unplugging? Not prioritizing, most important work in order to sort of maximize your productivity, or overcoming distractions and interruptions at home. I think that's probably one of the hardest ones for me, especially having a 5-year-old. Feeling lonely and isolated, you know, if if you're working from home and you're an independent worker and you don't really have that much of a team that you connect with very often, it can get really lonely. But sometimes when you do have a team, there's these communication issues that build up and you feel out of the loop because you're just not talking to people as often as you used to. And then there's technology issues, you know, the challenges of being really competent online. And of course, bad health habits, you know, you're stuck at your desk, you're not moving around the way you used to, you're not going for as many walks, you're not walking to the bus, you're not walking to the grocery store, you're not meeting people for lunch and getting up and going out, right? So the lack of movement has increased dramatically. So as a result, what do you have to do? You have to really try to stay motivated. And to move up in your career, it takes even more work because your boss isn't seeing you and they don't see all the extra work you're doing or putting in. Or how do you show them and not feel like, you know, you're being boastful or not being humble, but being able to show that you're really doing a good job? There's so many of these challenges. So I want you to note down for yourself maybe 3 or 4 of the top challenges you're having, because you need to identify them in order to know what you need to work on changing. Okay? So note those down. I'll give you a moment to do that. All right. So now that we have a sense of what those might be for us, because we're all individuals, and this work situation with COVID has affected everybody a little bit differently. A lot of us have, you know, similarities, similar challenges, but some of us need different solutions. And so that's why we're going to answer this question right now. What is work-life balance for you? What do you think it really means for you? Is it just not working late at night? Is it being able to get out more frequently? You know, what do you see for yourself? What does your life feel like or look like when it's balanced, when you feel like you're getting enough of everything? So let's write that down. What does it mean to you? What vision do you get? And what does it feel like when it's balanced? Now, some of you might prescribe to more stricter separation, you know, like boundaries. This is my work time. This is my play time. Some of you might think your whole life needs to be integrated and there's no way of getting around that. Or some of you might be workaholics and you're totally fine with having it way more work and way less, you know, fun time. But it depends on you. It's very personal. Imagine life as a game in which you are juggling some 5 balls in the air. You name them: work, family, health, friends, and spirit. And you're keeping all of these in the air. You will soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and spirit, are made of glass. If you drop one of these, they will be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. This is such an important quote for us to wrap our head around how important all those other parts of our life are, and how work is malleable. right? It's a rubber ball. It will bounce back. So you will not know when you depart from your ideal life if you don't have an ideal in your mind. So that's what we're working towards right now. We want to get a clear idea of what that balance looks like for us. You need to know what that looks like so you can monitor your bad habits, or if you don't have an ideal, how do you know what you should be doing, right? And lastly, it's really, really hard to create something if you can't see it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on this exercise. I call it the ideal work exercise. What does your ideal day at work look, feel, and run like? All right. We just talked about what your balance looks like. So now let's look at what the part of that, which is work. What does that ideal day look like and feel like? Where are you when you're doing it? Who are you with? What are you doing? We have to really spend time envisioning what this means to us so that we can make it realize. We can bring it to reality. And unless we get really specific and detailed, it's not very easy to achieve because it seems sort of vague and distant. But there's so much research that shows when you write it down and you're specific, exactly what it looks like, where you are, what you're doing, then you can envision what that is. You can visualize and affirm it on a daily basis as you work towards it. You take a step and a next step and a next step to get closer and closer to that ideal work. All right? So take another minute and think about that and write that down for yourself. For an example, do you work better in the morning or in the afternoon? Do you need to work out to be productive? I feel a million times better if I go out for a walk in the evening and sort of let go of everything that happened that day and get to think fresh about what I want tomorrow to be like, right? What's your routine? Or are you more of a flexible person where you don't like the same thing every day, right? Are you fast at adjusting to a new schedule, or do you need, more concrete schedule where a certain time you're doing this and a certain time you're doing that? What works for you? Are you finding new tech solutions, for example, new programs and apps and things to help you be more productive? These are the kinds of things that we need to work into our plan. And this exercise is the beginning of that plan. All right. So this is really the meat and potatoes. It's a English expression. I don't know what that would be in Spanish, but it's the very sort of center of what we started with at the beginning, right? We started with all the different parts of who we are. And these are your drivers, las motivaciones, the things that push you to be who you are, to do what you are, to decide what your life is going to be like. And we all have these drivers that motivate us. They are an extension of who we are. So your health and your wellness, la salud y bienestar, your home and family, your career and work, la carrera y el trabajo, la comunidad y los amigos, your community and your friends, right? And the questions around these things are, why do you work as hard as you do? Who are you trying to help? What legacy do you want to leave? The answers to those questions are your drivers. And it may be different for everyone, but there's usually some very specific ones that everyone shares. And these 4 are those. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what these 4 drivers mean to you in your life. When you push hard and you sacrifice, even when you don't have to, you know, you find yourself in one of these 4 drivers that are pushing you to do it. So let's take 2 minutes and write down a goal in each one of these areas. A goal for this year in a way that helps us envision what, if we had the perfectly balanced life, what would I be doing in each of these areas? What would I be doing for well-being and health? What would I be doing for home and family? What would I be doing in friends and community? And not last, and definitely not least, career and work. What would you be doing in your career and work? What are some of the goals, the things that you think will help bring better balance to your life? While you're thinking about that and while you're writing them down, I'll give you a couple of examples. So for me, well-being and health is really important. And I started being very intentional about doing yoga every couple times a week. I'd say probably every other day. Because for me, my muscles were very tight and my neck would hurt sometimes, and I just didn't feel 100%. And though I'm an athlete and I like to do more intense sports, yoga for me was a calming, healthy activity that could help bring some sort of serenity to all the other physical activity I was doing. So that's an example. So now let's get even deeper. All right? I know you got your juices flowing and you're thinking of some ideas. Now I want you to, we're going to dig deep into each one so that you can understand how it really affects you. All right? So your why, your purpose in life, el propósito, la meta de la vida, lo que sea. How many of you who know what that why is, and how many of you need to really sort of do a little bit of work and figure out what that why is, why that purpose is that you do what you do? It's really important that we do this work, because when we can identify the values that we believe in and that, you know, give us the strength and the motivation to do the things we do, it helps us understand ourselves and to better organize a lifestyle that works for us, that helps us achieve our purpose. So for an example, when I was 13, I went to Italy for the first time with my grandmother. She was an Italian immigrant who came to Canada in the 50s. She had my mom as soon as she landed, and she had not gone back home to Italy in a very long time. But I begged her to go. So we went, and at the time, I didn't speak Italian. I understood a little bit, you know, growing up in my grandmother's home, she spoke Italian, which was a dialect of Italian, actually. And I could understand her, but everybody else in the house spoke English. So when we went, one of the first things I observed is that Italians are very aesthetic. They take pride in the beauty of things. My Italian family spent their time and their money on beautiful things. Not many things, not a lot, but beautiful, well-designed, expensive things, like leather and wood furniture, like Levi's jeans, which were $150 back then. And I was lucky if I had a $20 pair of jeans, much less $150, right? But that lesson made me inspect my own habits. In North America, we have a consumerist culture. And I learned to want quality over quantity when I went to Italy. I became uber aware and changed my mindset and then my habits as a result. I realized I wanted to enjoy more time with people and that I learned so much when I immersed myself in culture. And that work was a means to a better life, not the meaning of life. So these values help me determine my behaviors and help me create the lifestyle I desire. But it starts by knowing what I value. And I began to value quality over quantity. So it's really important that you have a clear grasp of what your values are so that you can have a clear vision of the purpose behind your work. I like to think of values as kind of a personal code that guides our actions and our responses to a variety of circumstances. They provide a sort of parameters of how you will design your life and work going forward. Call it the blueprint for living your why. So why is that important to you? Your work lifestyle is super important to you, and understanding your values enables you to design a work lifestyle on your terms. It enables you to be productive on your terms. So when you nail down your why, all your decisions and actions flow from your idea of what your ideal lifestyle should be. And now that you understand your motivations, you can align all of those things, your values, your behaviors, the things you're going to do to achieve them. So the three things that are maybe places where you can start are: 1, create your own unique lifestyle based on your needs and your passions. It's important to understand what you really want, and those are your passions, what you're very excited about and curious about, right? You want to incorporate those into your lifestyle so that you have that balance between responsibilities, things that you have to do, and passions, things that you love to do. But in order to do that, you have to really be clear on your purpose, the reason why you're working. Right? Because otherwise, sometimes you feel, oh my gosh, I work and there's no, joy in it if you don't know what the purpose is that's pushing you to be there, right? You want to really make that clear for yourself. And thirdly, you want to develop a create time mindset. And the way you create time is by not filling every minute. Now, you have to determine where you're wasting time. And there's apps for that, I'm sure there are Spanish apps as well, but the English ones I know of are like Rescue Time, or there's a technique called Pomodoro technique, or there's Timeout that is good for your eyes. It turns your computer screen off and reminds you to go take a walk. These are things that are really important for you to help create more time and better quality time. So now that we better kind of understand how our purpose, our motivation, and our drivers and our values work together, you can apply this to every part of your life and take an audit of every area, your home life, your work life, your friends and community life, and figure out how this applies there too. A very important point is to understand that setting a work purpose is a surefire way to stay energized throughout the day. Kumanu data shows that having a sense of purpose does wonders in creating energy. Kumanu users with a high sense of purpose have 34% more energy than those who have a low sense of purpose. So purpose is not only important for your passions, purpose is super important for your work because it increases your energy and gives you the drive you need to be the type of worker you want to be and have the type of enthusiasm and creativity at work that makes you enjoy your work. There's a growing concern that when you allocate time as a measurement for life success, that there's never enough time. And we use this terminology and it doesn't work. It's limiting. So instead of focusing on how we spend our time and how there's not enough time and there's only 24 hours in a day and all of these very limiting ideas, we need to focus on how we spend our energy and use our energy wisely. Design our workday in a way that capitalizes on when we have energy the most. And that's why I posed you the question earlier. Do you work better in the morning? Do you work better at night? Do you work better after a coffee? You know, do you work better after a walk? Understanding you helps you capitalize on when your energy is at its strongest. Let's move on to driver 2, career and work. Eduardo, poll number 2, we are here. I want to make sure before we get into the poll that now that we're clear on our purpose, and don't get me wrong, there's more work to be done. It's not that, you know, you think of your purpose in a 5-minute conversation and all of a sudden, it's clear and the stars are shining and the moons and have aligned and everything is perfect. That's not what I'm saying. It takes work and constant sort of reflection and refining, right? It's a work in progress. But right now, when we dig into work, we can start answering these questions thinking in our work capacity, all right? So let's jump into this poll. And this poll is about personal productivity. Oh, sorry, there we are. Personal productivity and why we really work. You know, what have we always wanted to do for work and what we don't like much about work and all of these things. Eduardo?
Yes, fantastic. We are going to start now.
Perfecto. All right. ¿Por qué trabajas? Tu principal factor de motivación. Dígame. ¿Y qué es lo que menos le gusta del trabajo? La cosa... Y número 3, ¿cómo le gustaría trabajar? Awesome. There are lots of answers coming in. I'm excited to see the results. it's very interesting because we've all been taught to work in a way that might not seem natural to us as individuals. And many of us don't like working because we don't actually work in a way that suits us. And so we're going to see, you know, we all have different peak performance times in the day, and some of us need different things, as I discussed, you know, whether it's caffeine or exercise or walks or meditation for that matter. Let's talk about what we need to be our most productive. I'll give you another 15, 20 seconds for the rest of you to respond. Muy interesante, número uno. Nadie eligió para hacer toneladas de dinero. Quizás es una cosa muy cultural, ¿no? Well, I guarantee you when I did this in Canada, there were some in that category. So it just goes to show that, you know, we've been so trained and molded by our environment and our family and our cultural values and norms. And that's why it's so interesting to do a poll like this. So let's look at the results. ¿Por qué trabajas? Para mantener a su familia. So to maintain one's family is the number one, 35, and to serve people or to help others is second at 27%. And ¿qué es lo menos que le gusta del trabajo? What do you like least about work? Wow. 54% said nothing. I love my work. That is amazing. I think that must be a record in that particular question. 27% said it's not sufficiently desafiante. No es lo suficientemente desafiante. Yes. And you know what? I can totally relate to that. And that's why I do what I do now, because at the beginning of my career path, that's how I felt. I really did feel that way. I felt like, you know, they're not using me to the best of my ability, you know, and they're not taking advantage of my creativity and my passions and desires to help and change and just do things in ways that are new, you know. So I could totally relate to that one. Number 3, the majority said that they're sort of best working in the morning, and the next said with lots of people that they can talk to. And so I think that's really telling culturally as well, because there are certain places in the world where people are just so much more relationship oriented than others. And in Latin America and the Caribbean and Africa and the Middle East, this is very much the case. Relationships are like the crux of your being, you know, it's very much a human necessity. And it's not that it's not super important in other places of the world, it just shows up differently. You know, we're taught to build relationships differently and to spend time with others differently. So that is really cool to see that, you know, Ecuadorians are maintaining that connection with their colleagues and their folks, because to me, it's one of the things I admire and love the most about the Latin culture. That's why I do my best to spend as much time as possible in Latin countries. So that is super cool. Now, having done that, I want to share with you A flexible work environment has been shown to decrease stress, boost levels of job satisfaction, and help employees maintain healthier habits. Employers should offer flexible work hours, the ability to work from home, and unlimited PTO, paid time off, to create a more flexible work environment that appeals across generations of workers. So this is a viewpoint, a North American viewpoint that has come up over and over again. And it's very interesting because the research has shown that people, when they have more flexibility, do a better job because they start to figure out that they're more productive at certain hours, that they're, they're not stressed when they can handle certain immediate life challenges, whether it's family oriented or finances or something happened at home that you needed to take care of. When you can get those things off your plate, you can be more attentive and creative and productive at work. So this is really important. And for those of you on the call who might be employers, this is a discussion that really needs to be had, because your employees and the team members that you totally care about and want to see do well are really more productive when they have that flexible schedule. So one of the things we can do at work is rethink how we think about time and priorities. So these are some of the areas that I think we can really focus on to move the needle, to make some progress in our work-life balance, all right? So one is treating priorities like the broken water heater. Now, if you had a broken water heater at home, and this is a very sort of fun metaphor that a woman named Laura Vanderkam used once that I thought was priceless, is that if you had a broken water heater at home, you would stop everything you're doing and address it immediately. Otherwise, your home would be damaged and very expensive to repair, right? So think about your priorities in that way. You find time when it matters. So make your priorities matter. And don't let other things that are not as important interrupt you and stop you from doing what you most want to do. And that's what you should line up as your priorities. All right. Number 2, instead of using the term, I don't have time, use it's not a priority. You are reframing how you think about all the things that you have to do. There is not enough time today to get it all done is not helpful. What's helpful is today the priority is 1, 2, 3. The rest I'll address tomorrow or the next day when it becomes a priority. This gives you back the power of not feeling like you're always running out of time and you have an endless to-do list, because we all do, right? We all think being productive is having this endless to-do list, but the reality is the more on your to-do list, the harder to do. So when we shorten that to-do list and make it only priorities, we get more done. We feel better about ourselves because we get those things done. And then we can tackle the next one with a fresh mind and a fresh sort of perspective, not feeling like, oh my gosh, I didn't get it all done today. Make sense? All right. Number 3, question whether what you're doing is really valuable. Now in English, there's a term. Is it a hell yes? All right. Now, I don't know how to say that in Spanish, but the point is that it has to be 150% yes. Otherwise, it's a no. And that is really hard for many of us. It was very hard for me, and it still is. Sometimes, you know, I'm like, oh, I really want to do that and I want to do that. But the reality is you can only do so many things. And it has to be the thing that really, really matters to you and is going to move the dial. All right? All right. Lastly, prioritize by putting them in your calendar first. That is probably the most useful way to use your calendar. Put your priorities in your calendar, and everything else don't put in your calendar. And once you get those priorities done, then you add new things to your calendar, because it can be very easy to overwhelm yourself on a calendar. And we all do it, especially at work. All right, we have 2 more drivers to work through before our question and answer. So I hope you've been writing things down and getting your ideas together and thinking of what next steps you're going to do in those different areas. All right, so driver 3, home and family. Now, we obviously saw from our work poll that good relationships are very important to you all. And good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. Okay? This is something that has been proven time and time again. And there's this study, the longest running study on happiness, has proven that the good relationships are what really, really make us happy and make us healthy. So what should we focus on? Our social connections. If they make us happier, the way they make us happier is by focusing on the quality of those relationships as opposed to the quantity of those relationships. It's really important for us to pick and choose and build relationships with people that really matter to us, or that we think we can help, or we can, you know, share things with and improve each other's lives with, right? For an example, high conflict marriages are very, very bad for our health. Yet good, close relationships are like buffers from the slings and arrows of getting old. So in order to be healthier, we need to protect our brains by having healthier relationships. And we inevitably live longer because it's like a protection from getting older. These relationships help us in so many ways, not just physically and emotionally, but the happiness that it brings to us helps us actually channel our energy and help others more. And it's amazing how, how sort of satisfied you feel when you help others. That is a true human desire to be useful and to help others, right? And those things are more possible when you have strong relationships and these different social connections. The other thing that's very interesting is optimism. There have been many studies on optimism that show the dopamine, which is what your brain emits when you're optimistic, automatically makes you happier. You know, most companies and schools follow a formula for success, right? If I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, I'll be happier. But the reverse is actually true. If you think with optimism, your brain works better than on a negative, neutral, sort of stressful scenario. And your creativity and energy rises. So being optimistic first is what will lead you to being happier later. that positivity turns on dopamine and the brain's learning centers are fired up. And these opportunities for growth are sort of, you know, they're just never ending when you're optimistic. Because when you're stressed out, that part of your brain shuts off. So let's really focus on that. Let's focus on keeping, you know, an optimistic mindset so that we can enjoy a longer life, a happier life, and more fruitful connections. We found that spending time in natural green spaces is associated with diverse and significant health benefits. It reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, premature death, and preterm birth, and increases sleep duration. People living closer to nature also had reduced diastolic blood pressure, heart rate, and stress. So one of the really interesting things we found is that exposure to green space significantly reduces people's levels of salivary cortisol, which is a physiological marker of stress. So this is from the Science Daily, a journal of environmental research. And what is so interesting about this is right now, we need to spend more time outdoors, especially when they're telling us to stay inside. We need to be creative and find ways, you know, your balcony, your backyard, the beach, the park, wherever you're allowed to go, run fast and go there. Get outside and enjoy the fresh air, because it is so easy to get stuck inside in our home offices, on our computer screens, and not soaking up the energy of the sun and the people and the natural wonders, the trees and the oxygen and the flowers and the birds and all the things that make us feel alive. This is super, super important. So I really want to encourage you to find a way to work that in to your new work-life balance program. All right. So lastly, I know we're nearing 4:30 where we get to chat and take some questions, but this is a very important driver, our friends and community. We miss touching each other and hugging each other and laughing and sharing a glass of wine or a cerveza or whatever it might be. We miss that human contact. So now, more important than ever, we have to find ways to keep it alive. All right? Relationships are our responsibility to keep creating, you know, and we need to take the space, whatever space we need, to feel socially connected. All right. I know that during COVID, there's been a shift and we're spending less and less time with people due to this physical distancing. But I can tell you, one of the unintentional bonuses I've heard from several colleagues and friends is that you're not forced to spend time with people you don't like. So you get to spend time with people you really do like and be more selective. And when you're more selective, you can go deeper with those people that you want to know better. And once again, focus on the quality and not the quantity. And frankly, I can't agree more, because my husband and I, a couple years ago, decided that we wanted to spend more time with a few very specific couples that we knew. We wanted to get to know them better and see how we could help each other grow personally and professionally, because there is value in deeper connections. And I really encourage you all to think, okay, who do I want to do that with? Right? Right now, you have to make a choice. You kind of have to pick, who are your priorities? So what I want you to do is think about 3 people you could pick that you want to go deeper with, you want to build a deeper rapport with. It could be a social friend, it could be a work friend, it could be someone in your community, at your church, on your street, one of your neighbors, right? It could be anybody. When you're intentional about developing these relationships, you start to think of sort of new ways to new possibilities and new solutions to ways of building relationships. And nowadays, obviously, online is one of those ways. Prioritizing a healthy culture and cultivating a happy workplace environment promotes work-life balance. When employees are happy in their roles, work will feel more like a second home and less like working for a paycheck. So I want you to know that this is important in all of these environments, your work, your community, and your home, for you to pay attention to these relationships and building them deeper one day at a time. With a little bit of focus and a little bit of care, you will be surprised at how much more you learn about people and about yourself, because that's really the beauty of building relationships. So last couple of things I want to mention before we take questions is there are a ton of apps out there to help you with your work-life balance plan. There are project management apps like Buffer and Asana and Trello. There are creativity apps like BrainSparker and Audible and TEDx. There are communication apps like InkFlow and Evernote. There are focus apps like Serene and Freedom and Lumosity for brain care and Rescue Time and Cold Turkey for productivity. There are tons of apps. These are just some of the ones that I've used or have heard of. And I think that when you get a plan together about the things that you want to change and adapt, maybe, you know, add in new ways of being productive or taking more time for yourself, do a little bit of research into these. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Just pick one and roll with it, because the more you use them, the more you'll see if it fits into your lifestyle that you're trying to create. So I'm going to skip this just for time, but I want you to think about the things you have been doing that have helped you keep sane, okay? And I want you to take note. You know, is it reading a book? Is it doing puzzles? Is it shopping locally? Is it spending time in nature, like we suggested? I want you to take notes of the things that have been working, that have been helping, and make sure you make those a regular part of your routine. And for those of you that haven't been doing the things that you need, take a screenshot and think about, what on this list can I do? What can I put into place? Is it yoga? Is it gardening? Is it decluttering? That's the top one on my list. I start and then, you know, life happens and then it just doesn't finish. But that is one of the key ones for me. So make sure you keep doing the things that have kept you sane during this wild time. All right? So what if work-life balance has nothing to do with work? What if it's about authentically owning and clearly communicating your yeses and nos to the people who share your life? What if it's that simple? What if it's just knowing what your yeses and nos should be, what your priorities should be, and what you need to just X out? My goal for all of us today is the idea of lifestyle design, where we choose how our life is going to be. We design it instead of society designing it for us. We are self-directed. We are intentional, living and working in harmony with our purpose, with our needs, balancing meaningful work and time to restore our energy and our creative juices, and giving ourselves the freedom to do work how and when we're most creative and productive. This is my goal for all of us, that we use these tools we talked about today to achieve this. So I hope that this has at least gotten the juices flowing and ideas and ways for you to start implementing in your life. To remind you, these are the 4 areas: your well-being and health, your home and family, your friends and community, and your career and work. And all of these things, vision, purpose, values, goals, priorities, optimism, time in nature, relationships, responsibilities, and your own growth mindset will create the work-life balance you're so desiring and deserving of. So I'm going to end off now with a quick sort of an exercise for you to take away and do. This is the most important thing for you to be able to put this into action. All right? Make a list for yourself. This is my must do, must not do list. And these are the things, your priorities, and separate for yourself what those things are in those 4 areas. For yourself, your health, your family, your work. What must you do? What would you like to do if you have the time? And what must you not do? What do you really need to cut out? Do this exercise for yourself. And I hope that we get a chance to report back some way. You know, you can send me an email, let me know how it's doing, you know, how you're doing with it. I would love to be able to support you on this journey. So each has identified a life's work that is important to them, and each both draws on and gives back to their families and communities in order to make that life's work succeed. They exemplify how one can cultivate a life in which values, actions, social contribution, and personal growth exist in harmony. It's a life in which disparate pieces fall into place, not every single day. That's the impossible myth of work-life balance, but over the course of a lifetime. So work on it every day, and you will get closer to what that lifestyle that you deserve is for you. Thank you so much. And I really am excited to hear your questions. If you want to get in touch at another, at another time to check in and see how you're doing, feel free to email me. Jessica can share my information as well. But right now, I would love to take some questions with you all. And Jessica, feel free to share some of the questions that have come up or direct folks to do so.
Muchísimas gracias, Daphne. Realmente sumamente interesante la información que nos has provisto hoy día. Creo, como lo dijiste, estamos viviendo una situación que nos ha obligado a cambiar y a modificarnos nuestra vida cotidiana. Como pudiste ver, me gustaba mucho ver el tema de los resultados de la encuesta. Extrañamos, tal como tú decías, tal vez es un tema cultural, pero extrañamos trabajar en nuestras oficinas, en nuestros lugares de trabajo. Extrañamos nuestros compañeros de oficina, con nuestro segundo hogar. Justamente, como tú lo mencionabas, es algo que al rato es muy cultural, pero extrañamos eso actualmente. Entonces, Nos has puesto un reto bastante interesante de lograr definir cómo lograr ese balance entre la vida profesional, entre la vida personal, que estamos, más que nada, como la estamos viviendo hoy en día. Quiero compartirte justamente una consulta que nos realizaron en el chat. Dice, esta pandemia redefinió lo que es importante, ponderando la cantidad de cosas que se hacía anteriormente versus la calidad del tiempo, priorizando la fundamental. ¿Esta sería la visión de la nueva normalidad? ¿Qué opinas tú?
For me, the new normal is someone who is more aware of what life before was, what life is now, and what life should be in the future. Because now that we've had the chance to slow down, we can look back and see where we were spending time doing things that were not necessarily worth our time or leading us to our goals, right? So yes, we had some freedoms before that we don't have now. And when those freedoms return, which they will, they will return, we have to then reevaluate and say, okay, I've learned in this quiet time that I can actually do more while I'm doing this, or I can work better while I'm doing that. Or matter of fact, I don't need to travel every day to go to work anymore. I would prefer a job where I have the opportunity to work remotely at home, etc. So everybody is going to have a different idea depending on how their experience was working through this pandemic. But the key is that you learn, because there is a value to this wildness that has happened. There's a value that we are now having to really dig deep and look at what is really most important, which is what you identified. And that what's really most important might be different in a year from now when life has somewhat returned to normal, right? So we have to be able to be flexible. And that is one of the most desired qualities. I've done a lot of research for clients recently around sort of desired qualities in employees. And one of the most desired qualities is adaptability. And that was before the pandemic. So imagine now, right? Adaptability and collaboration are two of the most desired qualities. And it's amazing how that is a quality that's not only good for work, it's good for our own lifestyle, right? It's good for our personal lives and being able to achieve the other goals and dreams we have that aren't related to work, right? Our family and being able to do, wonderful things with our family and create beautiful memories, and our community, being able to raise our community up and help some of the groups that need more help or are less fortunate. There's so many different things that we can look at with a different lens now that we've gone through this.
Muchísimas gracias. Tengo una consulta. En la parte en la que tú hablabas de los four drivers, la parte de salud, la parte de familia, los amigos y la comunidad, la carrera y el trabajo. Yo te pregunto a ti, ¿cómo lo ves tú desde tu perspectiva? ¿Cuáles serían los 4 principales elementos que tú pondrías dentro de ese encuadro actualmente?
I'm not sure I understand the question, because when I outline these 4 drivers, I outline these 4 drivers because they are the most common 4 drivers amongst people. The 4 motivations that most people share. So for me, that's why I think they're really important to discuss, because I think most of you would relate to them and see that there is something about them that matters to you or that motivates you to work in that area, right? The way that you address it is totally personal, right? So for me, my health and wellness is going to be different than someone else's, because we have different physical bodies and we might have different challenges. You know, someone might be dealing with an illness, another person might be generally healthy but wants to get more fit. You know, we have these different reasons or motivations for focusing on that. In career, we all have different goals. We're in different industries, right? So depending on your industry or what you want to do as a, you know, how you want to advance in your career will determine what kind of focus you put there. You know, do you need to, are you in the early stages of your career where you need to really sort of buckle down and do the hard work so that you can prove yourself? Or are you in the later stages of your career where, you know, you've done a lot of work and you don't need to prove yourself anymore, and now you just want a few really awesome projects you're passionate about? You know, that depends depending on where you are.
No, perfecto, muy bastante claro. Justamente también en la parte de lo que tú mencionabas entre las diferencias, tanto con Ecuador como en Canadá, hablabas justamente de la experiencia y las estadísticas. En temas de la situación, obviamente la pandemia muy probablemente haga que nuestras prioridades dentro de este año sea la parte de salud y trabajo, y obviamente pues la parte familiar. Pero considerando el ejemplo canadiense, ¿cuáles ven las principales diferencias actualmente entre Ecuador y Canadá versus a lo que tú has visto al momento?
The main differences in terms of work-life balance, is that what you're referring to?
Sí.
Now that we're globalized, it's very interesting because we work with so many international teams, right? And as a result, we are having to learn how to work with different cultures. And that's actually how I got into this work, is by helping teams work across cultures, because there are so many differences in how we work depending on where we live. But I think between Ecuador and Canada, some of the key differences for me is that the one that I pointed out, which is Latin Americans in general are very relationship oriented. And that is a really important piece of their identity and an important piece of your work life, your social life, and all of that. And it's not that Canadians, for example, don't love, people and don't want to be around people. It's just that the way it manifests itself is different. You know, the amount of time you spend with your colleagues is probably different. The amount of time you spend with your colleagues' families, for example, is different. You know, knowing each other in your community, knowing your neighbors is different if you're in a small town or in a big city, right? So these differences, I think, are what pose maybe some challenges. But I think because we're online and we're all kind of in the same situation, we are actually conquering those challenges easier, because now we're all in the same boat and we can't really operate the way we were operating, right? So that's another kind of way I think COVID has almost leveled the playing field, like has made us all figure out a new way to communicate. And it's growing, you know, we're growing, we're changing as we do this. And culture is definitely one of those things that changes constantly. And with our global connections, our cultures are adapting to each other, you know? So you had asked really I don't know if I answered your question really, you had asked if there are many differences. And I think really there's probably more similarities now than differences, because we're all in the same boat.
Sí, realmente me ayudaste bastante con la consulta. También me preguntan, ¿cómo se llama? ¿Cuál sería tu visión o tu recomendación de cómo tratar de mantener un equilibrio en la parte personal con los miembros de la casa, considerando de que ahora se tienen las diferentes edades, todas en el mismo sitio? Vivimos en familia, ¿verdad? Pero ahora pasamos mucho tiempo juntos, bastante, y ahora estamos, aparte de manejar la parte laboral, están todo el tiempo con el esposo, todo el tiempo con los hijos haciendo deberes en casa. Entonces, ese mix, me consultan cómo podría haber, si podría sugerir un modo de poder sobrellevar generar un equilibrio con esa situación en casa.
It is the hardest of all the things right now because, you know, as the quote I mentioned about the balls, right? All these different parts of our lives are balls that can shatter, right? And our home life is so important to our mental health, you know, and our happiness. And I have found that one of the best ways to manage home life is to designate private time. You know, there's a certain time of the day or a certain time of the week where it's mom's time by herself. Don't interrupt her. Don't go in her room. Don't call her. Matter of fact, pretend she does not exist. That's what I have to do with a 5-year-old, or else it will, you know, you will not be able to collect your own thoughts because you're constantly handling so much action around you, right? So I think that is a really good sort of tactic. The other thing that is super important and healthy is to get out, right? You really need to get out because now that we're in a more confined space and we don't have as much personal space, you need to create more space. So how do you do that? If you're in a country that's not totally locked down, you can go out to a park or a beach or a mountaintop, right? You can go out and get the space you need because space is very important to your thought processes, and it allows you to get out of your head and see beyond yourself. That's the beauty of space, right? And that's why it's so important, even just to keep your own space decluttered, right? In order for you to think, because the more clutter around you, the more cluttered your head becomes. So those, I think, are two feasible things you can definitely do.
Muchas gracias. Sí, estoy completamente de acuerdo contigo. Es una parte difícil de manejar, pero hay que buscar las maneras y creo que has dado algunas recomendaciones bastante favorables. Me preguntan también cómo identificar si estoy en el trabajo correcto o cómo identificar el desinterés laboral.
That's a great question because when I've done work with companies on, or even individual professionals on personal branding, like who they are, you know, what they value, what their purpose is in life, and what they want to tackle and what direction they should go in. One of the tools that I think is most helpful to them is assessments where they get to understand themselves better. So finding out what your strengths are, you know, the areas that you do really well in, and understanding what motivates you, like these drivers we talked about. If you start doing this work that we started today and you actually write down for yourself the things that you really enjoy, the things that you don't, the type of work that makes you want to wake up and get going. What that is a very important sign. Because if you're not enjoying what you do and the effects you're creating, then work-life balance is going to be very hard to achieve because you're miserable. You're not fulfilled. So I think the first step is to look at what you're really good at, what you envision for your life, your ideal scene, that exercise we did, right? What does your ideal work look like? And then recognize that in order to get there, you might have to go through some growing pains, right? To become a famous actor, you had to do a lot of not so great roles first, right? Ones that you probably didn't like in order to get the one you really liked. So you have to be willing to sacrifice in order to get to that level that you so desire. So you have to be clear that it's not going to come without the work, but you want to make sure the work you're doing is leading you to that ideal scene that is going to fulfill the purpose you really have. I hope that makes sense.
Sí, realmente que sí. Y tendríamos una última consulta. Me indican cuáles serían tus recomendaciones para no caer en un estrés laboral durante el teletrabajo.
Work stress is dependent on your ability to manage your emotions, right? So if there's something that's causing you upset or regret in some way, like you didn't do something well, or you feel like you're going to be blamed because you made a mistake, or, the expectations are just too high or they're not realistic. If these things are building and weighing on you, then your stress is going to increase. So the way to manage that now is to really sort of level set with your boss or your team and make it really clear what's achievable in this new scenario you're working in. So for an example, I had a client that I was working with for the first 6 months of last year. So it was March when COVID hit, and we had to essentially all stop going to the office and start working from home. At that same time, schools closed. At that time, my son was 4. He was at home every day. And I had to be 100% frank with my, with the company I was working with at the time and say, listen, I can't work a full day. I have a 4-year-old who is here and he is not old enough to be able to learn on his own. And my husband is working and et cetera, et cetera. And at the time, I didn't have any other sort of childcare options. Now, for some people who live in an extended family and might have a grandparent or a sister or a niece, then you might have some different options. But me at that time, my choice was that I had to agree or get my contractor to agree that, listen, I will work a part-time schedule. I will be online for the first 3 hours in the morning. In the afternoon, I will be not online. I will be taking care of my son and will work whenever you need me in the nighttime. And that's what worked for me because I had to make a quick transition. Eventually, I ended up hiring a nanny and someone to take care of him. But for the first, I'd say 2 months, I had to make it work, and that's what I had to do to alleviate my stress, because the first month or so without any help and trying to work full time was just excruciating, So these are the things you have to get really creative and for lack of a better word, but ballsy, you know? Necesita las cojones to ask for what you need and want in order to be your best. You have to be willing to risk it sometimes. And that's what it takes to maintain your own sanity and that work-life balance we deserve, right? It takes that uncomfortable conversation with your boss or that uncomfortable conversation with your parent, you know, the grandparent, mom, please, can you help me? I will pay you. I will make you dinner, whatever you need to do to get the support so that you can continue to be productive.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Daphne. Realmente creo que nos has dado herramientas muy valiosas. Más que nada también nos has hecho ver las cosas desde otra perspectiva, que nos va a ayudar bastante en poder sobrellevar, más que nada lograr lo que es el título de esta conferencia, es decir, un balance entre nuestra vida profesional y nuestra vida personal. Quiero darte las gracias enormes en nombre de nuestra organización, de la Cámara de Comercio Ecuatoriano-Canadiense de Guayaquil, en nombre de nuestros participantes, de nuestros socios, de nuestros sponsors, por tu tiempo, por compartir tu conocimiento sumamente valioso para afrontar justamente esta situación y más que nada eso, lograr poder llegar a un punto de equilibrio entre las dos áreas de nuestras vidas, tanto la personal como la profesional. Quiero, gracias nuevamente, Daphne.
Thank you very much for having me. And for those of you that had asked for my email, it's there for you. Feel free to reach out and let me know how you're doing on your work-life balance journey. And if you need any help with your employers and convincing them some flexibility, we can have a call about that too. But I really appreciate it and hope that I get a chance to actually come to Ecuador. Así podemos trabajar juntos y conocemos mejor, ¿no?
Sí, realmente también esperamos que se pueda realizar o justamente hacer esta réplica contigo en persona. Esperamos que esta situación de la pandemia pronto acabe y poderte tener con nosotros aquí en nuestro país. Daphne, muchísimas gracias. Queremos agradecer también a nuestras empresas auspiciantes, a Mark Global, a Unidad Educativa Bilingüe Nuevo Mundo, a Jovirsa, agentes aduaneros. Deseo agradecer una vez más a Seneca College por su apoyo, por su soporte enorme, por tenerte aquí, Daphne, por permitirnos robarte un poquito de tu tiempo y poder compartir este espacio de conocimiento. Agradecemos a todos los participantes por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Les haremos llegar la presentación de Daphne a sus correos y obviamente está su contacto para que puedan estar vinculados directamente con ella. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes y una excelente tarde.
Muchísimas gracias. Chao, chao.